Hey guys, how's it going? It's Travis, senior biologist here at Adventure Aquarium with you. The last time we spoke, we were talking about sharks, but today we're going to kind of flip the script a little bit and we're going to talk about corals and coral reefs. So just continuing with our Earth Day celebration, you may have seen our earlier video with Liz Hahn. We're just going to keep going along with that theme as well. So actually coral reefs and sharks are kind of linked together, so without coral reefs we probably wouldn't see sharks in our oceans, and we'll get to that. But first what I want to do is just go over some of the questions that you guys had for us about corals and coral reefs. So the first question, always a great question to have, is whether or not a coral is a plant or animal. It's kind of a trick question in a way. So corals are plants and animals, but they're more so an animal. So the reason I say that though is because within a coral, it's all these hundreds and thousands of animals that have kind of joined forces along with algae, also known as zooxanthellae. And they have this symbiotic relationship. So the animal will actually build houses or like a big giant structure that you can see to the left or the right of me here. And the zooxanthellae that live in them will actually photosynthesize and provide that animal with an extra food source. So it's a really cool relationship. The zooxanthellae, they get this nice big house to live in and protection, and the animal gets all this food and energy in return. So the next question is, what is coral made of? So they can be made of many different things. The corals on my right, they're more of like a fleshy type of coral. So if you were to pinch your skin or your forearm or something like that, that's kind of what those corals will feel like. They'll also have kind of a mucousy membrane around them that helps them protect each other from diseases and bacteria. And then the other corals are going to be made of more like our bones. So they're actually made of calcium. Just like our bones are, and they're more of a hard, stony type of coral. So the corals here to my left, the majority of the corals in there, the real colorful ones, those are known as stony corals. So if you were to feel those, they're really hard, just like our bones that our skeletons are made up of. The third question here we have is, where do corals live? Corals can actually live in a wide ranges of temperatures and depths of the ocean. So a lot of times when we think of these really colorful corals, those are going to live primarily along the tropic regions. So like the Florida Keys, the Great Barrier Reef out in Australia, Indonesia, those areas. But you can actually find corals in colder climates they're seeing, and then also typically you find corals in depths of like anywhere from shallower waters to like 10 feet down to like 60 feet. But they're also starting to find that you can find corals hundreds of feet down where there's hardly any sunlight reaching the corals. So we're going to move on to the fourth question here. Why are corals so colorful, and where does the color come from? Corals can be really, really colorful, and that's primarily due to the pigments that live in them. So the pigments will actually reflect various wavelengths of the sun, and then really it's primarily coming from that algae too. That's where they're getting that color from. And so it's kind of the, I guess, answering both of those questions. So we'll move on to question 5. How big can coral grow and how long does it live? Corals can get absolutely massive. So just for instance, there's a species called Montastria that's found in the US here down in the Florida Keys. Those can get as big as smaller houses. A lot of times you'll see them, they're as big as like VW Beetles or small cars like that. And it takes really, for something to get to that size, it takes hundreds and sometimes even thousands of years. So that answers, I think, both of those questions there. So number 6, if a coral dies, can it come back to life? It's kind of a trick question in itself there. So a lot of times when you hear of like coral bleaching or coral dying off, if a little tiny piece of that lives, it can come back. So remember, going back before, what I was saying is it's coral is actually a bunch of animals that are kind of in this colony together. So what can happen is some of those animals may die, but just if 1 or 2 of them hang on and they can keep some of that algae in them, they can actually grow themselves back. It does, like I said, it takes a really long time for it to do that though. So that kind of jumps into question 7 here. How many different types of animals live in a single coral reef? So that kind of segues back into what I was talking about earlier, is without coral reefs, we probably wouldn't have sharks. Coral reefs provide a majority of the habitat in our oceans. Sometimes they're called the rainforests of the oceans because they harbor thousands of species, a huge diverse range of species. And because of that, it kind of has an effect on the whole ecosystem. So as you go up the food chain, big fish eats little fish. So you have all these tiny organisms that little fish on the reef will consume. And then those little fish will get eaten by bigger fish, and those bigger fish will eventually probably get eaten by sharks. So without the habitat that coral reefs provide for all those little fish, our sharks in the ocean wouldn't have a food source. And let's see, what can be done to save coral reefs? Probably the biggest thing that's hurting our coral reefs right now are just the warming of our oceans. So coral reefs, they need a really stable habitat. Recently in past years, we're having higher ocean temperatures. Also another thing is called ocean acidification. And that's coming primarily from carbon dioxide that's in the atmosphere. And all that carbon dioxide comes from us driving cars around and doing other sorts of industrial types of operation. So the biggest thing you guys can probably do is to limit your carbon footprint. So just think about your daily activities. Try to recycle more. If you can ride a bike to work or wherever you may be going, try to do that so you're not putting out as much carbon dioxide from your car. Another big thing especially is going to be excess nutrients in the water. And those nutrients can come from things like fertilizers and nitrates and phosphates. So like even in Florida, they're having periods in the summer, they call them blackout periods, where you can't use fertilizers. So if you're looking for a really nice lawn, try to figure out a way to where you're not getting as much fertilizer into your lawn, and use more organic types of fertilizers as well. So those are just a couple things. You can also look at different websites that you can try to donate money to, or you can try to especially down in the southern regions of the United States, like down in the Florida Keys. There's a bunch of different organizations that are trying to help save these reefs. And you can also come to Adventure Aquarium once we open back up. So you can come here and check these reefs out, maybe get inspired to be able to help too. We also take part in a program called the, I'm having a blank here. It's basically a program, FRT, oh my gosh, I'm sorry, the Florida Coral Reef Restoration. That's part of an AZA organization, which we are a part of as well. But we've taken on about 75 corals that pretty much had to be taken out of the wild because the conditions were so bad. And we're kind of a mini ARC among other zoos and aquariums that are doing that as well. And then once conditions hopefully return back to normal, we'll be able to put those corals back out in the ocean. But just by coming here, you're helping supporting a cause like that. So I hope I answered all your questions for you today and you learned a little bit more about coral reefs. So our Q&As are always Tuesdays and Thursdays. So this Thursday you're going to be joining Lauren talking about axolotls.